Hey, Neil McDonnell here. We're going to get started in just a split second. Just making sure my tech's good. Hey, for those of you who are showing up early, if you haven't taken a look, I put a post out on my LinkedIn feed today that is a CISA org chart. So the cybersecurity infrastructure, I can't even remember what it is. I get my name screwed up sometimes. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So CISA, however you want to pronounce it. It's out there on LinkedIn on my feed. So just afterwards, go there if that particular agency is one of yours. But they're also a very good agency, even if you're not supporting them or even Department of Homeland Security, which is their top one. They're a good one to connect with because they're talking on behalf of the White House, so they're taking the lead on cybersecurity across the entire federal agency. So knowing who they are and beginning to interact is something that I think would benefit you. Just looking, audio and visual good, appreciate it. Okay, so we're gonna get started here. Let me just find my slide to make sure I have it easy for me to remember some of the basic topics I want to talk to you about today. Okay, hey, I'm Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my daily LinkedIn Lives where I share process and procedures for people like you to achieve success in the federal market. I was a small business owner for 20 years, both on the civilian side and defense side, working with many different agencies. And since 2018, I've been teaching people just like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. And when we learn the process, we realize it's A to Z, and doing the steps in between helps us achieve the success or the outcome that we're looking for. So a sales life cycle, if you think of that whole thing as a process, then the outcome is a sale. Inside of there are all sorts of process steps. And today we're going to be talking about federal sales meetings, and that's a process in itself. It's a process to prepare for sales meetings. It's a process to have them. If you've never really dove deep into this whole idea of processes, really you can have a life cycle of processes that then have processes and processes within those, right? Processes and procedures. And I describe procedures as the actual steps to get something done, almost the how at a deep level. So that's what we're going to explore today, is talking about the federal sales. And I'm going to cover 3 parts today. And then tomorrow I'm doing another live session at noon East Coast here that'll dive deeper into the actual questions that we might prepare. So today we're going to talk about from a high level, understanding and talking about how to create an objective or determining an objective for your sales call, how to write down a purpose that's going to be a win-win purpose for the people you're meeting and yourself. And then the last thing, and it might, I'm going to go back and forth on these topics, but the last one is icebreakers, right? How to start a meeting with a kind of a way to break that. If you're going into a first meeting, you might need a little icebreaker. I'm going to talk to you about how to do that the right way or my way, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way, but it's a way. And it's a way I think is a very good way. So before we get too far into those, and again, today I'm going to do a little more free flow. I wanted you to see me think of objectives and scenarios and how I go from one to the other, and maybe visually, not visually, but by listening to me go through this process and watching my face as I'm trying to figure certain things out about, hey, if this is where we're going, here's what I would do for the objective. I wanted to do it a little bit more like that, which is closer to what you might experience, than to have 3 or 4 canned exact scenarios already prepared, and I just look like everything's so perfect, right? Doing stuff is not perfect until you really get it done. So in the chat, as we go along, go ahead and put your company name and core competencies so I know who you are. I can begin to remember who you are, and other people in the community or buyers can begin to remember you. So put that in the chat. But I was also going to say in the chat as I go along and where it makes sense to you, if you've got a meeting that you're planning on or some scenario that you'd like me to try to tackle with objectives and purpose statements, let me know and I'll try to work that into today's call. And Gus, you just track them in case they scroll up on the chat too fast for me to see. So before we get too far into the meat of this, I wanted to talk about why are we doing planning, right? Think about these 2 scenarios and which one sounds more like you, right? I've got a meeting. I'm just going to go to the meeting and I'll bring my capability statement or my briefing deck. And that's the entire planning activity I do. Or I have a meeting and I spend hours prepping, making sure I really have a solid objective. What am I trying to get out of that meeting? I really have got an agreed purpose with the customer. I've planned out questions. When you think about how you go to meetings currently, and you don't need to put this in chat, just think to yourself, how much preparation are you doing for meetings? And the reason I say this is because when we prepare for a meeting, we get out of that meeting what we want. One of the things that's really important to remember is what we want doesn't always go our way. And so let me use an example. If I say I'm going to a meeting and my objective is to get an NDA signed or an NDA started, et cetera. Well, when I go to that meeting, if I get them to agree to it, or I get them to say, no, I'm not doing an NDA with you, either one, the objective has been met because it's closed. It's kind of like when you submit a proposal. We all, of course, want to win, but the reality is, win or lose, that proposal has done its job, right? I mean, we of course wanted to win, but so you've met the objective because you've gotten them to make a decision. If they don't make a decision, if you don't talk about it, then you had a meeting with an objective determined and you didn't drive towards that. And so when we plan for a meeting, we're able to get out of that meeting what we hope. And I'm going to explore different things you might want to get out of a meeting, objectives that are coming in there. So when you think about objectives, I describe it as moving the sale forward. I was talking to somebody this morning, and with this customer, we were exploring what I have put in place. When you do capture, it isn't just about sitting around and letting things happen to you. That's not capture. Capture is, to use a sports analogy here or metaphor, right? Capture is about being on the field. If you think about a football game, you can be in three places at a football game. You can be in the stands watching the football game. You can be on the sidelines coaching a football game, or you can be on the field playing the football game. Capture is about being on the field. And so when you're preparing for meetings, what you're doing is preparing to be on the field to move the ball down the field, just to end with that scenario there. But in sales, it's moving that sale down the sales cycle. And so in capture, we have, let's say, 40 or 50 or 60 tasks that you should be doing in an opportunity to shape the acquisition size, shape the scope side. And so as you move forward on a sales cycle, you want to be achieving those little steps that lead to the win at the end of, proposal, et cetera. Well, preparing for a meeting allows you to determine what step in the sales cycle you need to accomplish today. What do I need to get done to move the sale a little bit forward? Preparing for a meeting will allow me to move the sale forward tactically, create a plan and then follow that plan. And tactically, I have moved it forward. So that's why it's really important to do this, right? And I want you to keep it in mind that if you are not doing a call plan for every single meeting you have, every single new sales meeting, right? If you've got a recurring meeting with a teaming partner that happens every 2 weeks, you don't need a call plan every 2 weeks. What you need is just an agenda, because you both are working together on it. And that's more about pipeline reviews. But if you're doing anything on a particular opportunity in capture, every single time you need a call plan, or you should have it, right? If you're doing business development, you should have a call plan. There's really only two areas where you're doing something in sales in the federal space: business development or capture. And depending on which one you're working on, you might have different objectives and purpose going in there. But having by preparing for these meetings and using a call plan, I keep referencing a call plan, I'll talk about that in a second. By using a call plan, writing down what you want to say, then you will be preparing for the meeting ahead of time. And then in the meeting, you'll have something there that'll continue to guide that meeting forward. So quick intro there on what we're talking about. I'm going to talk about this multiple times, but there's a call plan that I have. So if you're looking for a call plan template, I have a call plan template. And these things I'm about to talk about are part of the call plan. So you can put call plan, please, in the comments, and I'll get that to you at some point. So there's three things, again, I want to talk to you about for the rest of the time we have here training. One is objectives, and objectives are what you want to get out of the meeting. Second thing is purpose. What's the purpose we want to talk about? So the objectives, you can think of it a little selfishly. This is what I want to get out of this meeting. I want to get an NDA, for example. Purpose is you want to think of more win-win. This is a collaborative statement with the other person. The purpose of this meeting is to add value to your life and to my life, right? A win-win. Our purpose should never be, I'm getting things out of you, but I'm not giving anything back to you. And we'll talk about that. But a purpose is just really, what are we going to talk about? And let's agree to that. The objective I keep to myself. The last one I want to talk about, and I might start with this one, is an icebreaker. When you go into a meeting, and it's the first time you're meeting somebody, so this is for first meetings, whether you're in person or virtual, doesn't matter. You're going to start the meeting off with some level of chit chat. How are you doing? How about those Bears? Did you go to Disneyland? Whatever it is, you're going to have some level of chit chat, right? And the idea of an icebreaker is to make sure that whatever the chit chat you're going to do, that it leads to the purpose that you're going to talk about. So if my purpose is to talk about government contracting, which is every single one of my meetings in federal sales, right? We're going to talk about government contracting one way or another. Then my icebreaker needs to lead to that. So I'll give you a couple of examples of an icebreaker. In fact, let me start with a couple that are bad examples, in my opinion, and then ones that are good examples. So a bad example is to talk about a football game that happened on the weekend, or a basketball game, or whatever, right? Or somebody said, and a friend of mine said that they talk about Disneyland or something. The problem with talking about those type of things, trying to warm up the first couple of minutes of a meeting by talking about something friendly or personal, is you've let this business meeting, this sales meeting, become a personal bonding thing. And some people think that you must bond personally to get a good connection. That's nowhere near the case. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. They can like you all day long by looking at your professional accomplishments, by looking at your, by talking about whatever federal sales topic we're talking about. We don't have to talk about my lawn and how I'm putting in a new lawn for you to like me. Because even if you do like me, I'm using up precious time that I should be talking to you about your needs, or you should be talking to the customer about their needs. And so we use the examples of an icebreaker like golf, or, oh, hey, I see that you went to Disneyland. Is that a picture there? Is that your whole family? Like, we think that we're bonding personally with folks, and that's not the case. Many of us don't like to share that kind of stuff. I hate it if I get a salesperson I don't know asking me, right? I don't mind people I've had several meetings with begin to ask me about my kids and other stuff. But if I have no idea who you are, then I have no interest in talking to you about my personal life. I am just one person, right? So that's only one. There could be somebody else who loves to start it that way. But everybody likes to talk about themselves, right? Or likes to hear somebody else talking about you in a nice way. So an icebreaker that I would recommend you use instead of golf or Disneyland is to look for something about that person you're going to meet. It's important for you to do your research and homework anyways. So if I'll use this person, Matt Burkett, who is at Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane in the Navy. Yesterday, he commented on a poll that I did where I was calling him out, saying he's a great small business specialist, and I wanted industry to know who he is. And he commented back and said some things. Well, if you were doing your research and going to meet with Matt and you saw this on LinkedIn, you're like, you could use that as an icebreaker. Hey, Matt, I saw you were called out on that post by Neil McDonnell, or however you want to say it, right? Great job being seen as one of the best small business professionals in the federal government. And when you stop at that, he's going to naturally lean towards, I know that was great. I was humbled by that, but I really appreciated it. You could even stretch it one more bit by going, any idea what, makes you kind of rise to the top? Is like, do you just really like small businesses? Whatever it is you could be talking about that's leading to the purpose, right? You're talking about him. Genuinely, by the way, I don't ever mean fake any of this. I mean, look in and find something you like. So I use that one comment, but you could also find this same person, Matt, is out there doing an industry day briefing to small businesses, letting them know how to work on Crane. You could say, hey, I looked at that. I loved it. I loved how much content that was put out. Was that a lot of work for you? Did you get the results you were looking for? Whatever it is, you're chit-chatting for a second, and it's very easy to transition to the meat of your discussion, right? So he's flattered that you took the time to research, right? And this is not a flattery exercise, but as long as you're going to chit-chat, you might as well chit-chat about something that is a little bit more flattering, right? So he's flattered that you're doing that, and then he and you are talking about, in this case, Crane Naval Surface Warfare Center. So we're already talking about his installation when we talk about an industry day, or if he did a podcast and we listened to it, right? Make sure you listen to it and be able to actually reference it. But now you've got an icebreaker that warms it up. You don't have to feel uncomfortable. You genuinely are saying, hey, I appreciated finding that content out there about you, right? I appreciated the tips you were sharing. However you line that up, it's going to get him to feel, a little bit of beginning to like you. I like this person. They're not just diving in. They're not just saying, hey, I'm a veteran-owned business. You should give me money. Any of that kind of stuff, right? Maybe they're not going off on some weird topic. When I made the time to meet with them, I just want to talk about how they can help Crane. Whatever it is, it's the start of this new relationship liking you. So that's the icebreaker. Just watch my time here. So I talk about 3 things that you want to do when you're preparing. So you want to prepare that icebreaker, right? Go look on the internet, you're researching it. When you find something that could be an icebreaker, just put it on your call plan. And there's a spot on my call plan where you actually put it in. So you remind yourself about what you're going to talk about. The next 2 things are objectives and purposes. And just reminding you, an objective is what you're trying to get out of the meeting. You don't share it with the other person, right? You're selfishly thinking to yourself, if this meeting goes well, then I would like to get this thing out of it. So that's the objective. And the purpose is, hey, Matt, this is what we're going to talk about. So the idea of call planning is that you really are trying to pick one primary objective to get out of the meeting. If I'm meeting with somebody, I don't mind. I see Chris Wall's comment. Sorry, I usually don't look at chat, and that's why I don't look at chat, because I get distracted by it. I have one primary objective, and I want to. And so then the idea of a purpose statement, just to give you that as well, is the purpose statement I want to share with Matt. Let's just use Matt, Chris, because you said that. The reason for the purpose statement is to be able to say, hey, Matt, this is what I'm hoping to talk about today. Introduce my company to you, learn a little bit more about Crane. How does that sound, right? How does that sound is getting the other person to agree to the purpose of this meeting. Last week, I did a whole session on how to control a meeting, not in a bad way, but keep it running. So it's good for Matt, it's good for you, and everybody gets out of a meeting, what they hoped. It was not a waste of time. That's generally what we hope for, right? Anything after that is a bonus. But so the purpose is designed to align to that objective. So I always choose my objective first, write down the objective that I have, and then I begin to write the purpose to it. And this doesn't take a lot of time. In the beginning, when you're new to call planning, you might have to take a little bit of time to figure out the right way to say it, et cetera. But the reality is I can do a purpose statement in 2 seconds when I'm going in, because I have so many of the exact same meetings with different people. So if I'm meeting with this teaming partner and that teaming partner and that teaming partner, almost always my purpose for the first meeting is to introduce my company, learn a bit more about yours, and see if there's a synergy between the 2 companies, right? That's it. It's pretty straightforward for me. And you will get to that same level of confidence in preparing when you've done multiple call plans for meetings. So let's talk about this objective, right? The idea of an objective is to move the sale forward, I said. And moving the sale forward is this tangible thing. In a relationship with a small business, that might be, or a large business even, but that might be an NDA. For example, I'm meeting with this company, and I'm going to see if there's some synergy. Well, it seems like a normal next step for that relationship is to have an NDA. I like NDAs because they're written verification of our desire to have to build a relationship, right? A professional relationship. And so an NDA is a perfect thing because you're investing the time to talk to your people to get it signed. I'm investing my time. And by putting it down, it doesn't bind us really to anything except for keeping our mouth shut. But it's a written commitment. Hey, we've agreed to start dating. Doesn't mean we'll date forever. It doesn't mean we're dating exclusively, but it does mean that we're dating and we both have made that commitment. Compare that to meetings you've been in where people say, this is great. No, I love to work together. Let's get back together sometime. Well, that's no commitment at all, right? That's just being nice. That's why I like to sit there and say that when you have an objective that's like an NDA, you want to get that and it's written. Another example of an ND or a objective that could be across most stakeholders out there is an actual meeting scheduled. So I leave myself enough time in a meeting where I say my objective is to get a second meeting. For example, maybe the NDA is a little bit too pushy. I always got to figure it out. In fact, I ask in the meeting, I put down 2 objectives and I would say an NDA and a follow-on meeting. If I'm meeting with any business in particular, those are 2 of my favorite because I'm not looking to rush into a relationship. I'm looking to build a relationship. So a next meeting makes sense. I'm aiming for that. And I'm also aiming for the NDA. Well, I might ask about, hey, what's your guys' process on non-disclosure agreements, NDAs? Does your company like to get them in place right away, or can we continue the conversations without it? How do you like to move forward? And I figure out what they're comfortable with. If they're not comfortable with NDAs, or they go, we don't really care, then I might slide away from that and just stick to my objective of getting a follow-on meeting. The idea of getting a follow-on meeting, tying it back to the purpose, is I need to give them a reason for a follow-on meeting. And so in that meeting, remember, my objective is to get a follow-on meeting, but if I get it or I get an agreement not to have it, both of those are a win to that objective. So we might say that we want to get a follow-on meeting. That's our objective. The purpose then is to talk and see if your company and my company have a natural synergy where it makes sense for us to try to work together on future opportunities. If we decide that it does make sense, at least at this point, then getting a follow-on meeting is exactly what we want. If in this meeting, because we set up the purpose, we determine, there's not. We're both SharePoint companies. We both do the exact same thing. We're both going after the same market. And really, we don't want to work with each other or something, right? If we determine that it doesn't make any sense to stay in touch with each other, and it's really important to find those no's as well as yeses, right? Well, then I don't need a follow-on meeting and I don't need an NDA. So that meeting was still successful because I determined that this company is not one that I want to work with. It's unsuccessful if I think I want to work with them, but I didn't achieve any of those objectives. So I want to come back. I'm watching some of these chats in here. I guess you can have a meeting agenda with family. I wanted to use a few scenarios because sometimes people think I do call planning here with the government or something, but not with other people. You want to use call plans and setting an objective with everybody you're meeting with related to business development or capture, right? Those 2 big ones in particular. So think about a PCR, right? Show of hands, how many people know what a PCR is? It's a Small Business Administration's procurement center representative, a PCR, and they've got a lot of responsibilities, but I boil it down to their job is to monitor the agencies to make sure things that should go small do go small, right? I simplify their job description, but basically it's that, right? They're not an advocate for small businesses. They're almost like a regulator. Soft word, lower R. They're just in there to sit there and make sure that things that might be unfair to the small business side of the industry are being stopped. So anyways, I don't want to get too far into that. But one thing that they do have is tight relationships with contracting officers at their agencies of choice. I have this huge article coming out on the Army and a lot of, I think it's like 10 steps of doing homework in the Army if you want to do business development in there. And part of that are the PCRs that are responsible for the Army. And there's like 15 or 20 of them. So if you want to sell to the Army, you should know these people. If you're reaching out to them, in particular in this first call, then you want to create a call plan and have an objective. And one of the most important objectives from here is to get their permission to establish a relationship. Can I follow back up with you in a month? Can I come back when I have a particular opportunity I have a concern with? My favorite objective really though is I call a PCR and I say, I'm trying to get better in with Tinker Air Force Base. Could you introduce me? Would you mind making an introduction to that small business specialist or that contracting officer in there that you work with. So when you look at objectives, I want to wrap with this on objectives. When you're looking at objectives, it's a specific thing that you will get out of this meeting. So for an agency, you might think of an introduction to a program office or to somebody else in that agency. An introduction. A name is helpful. It's not an introduction. So you decide how hard you want to make that objective on yourself. Because getting a name is a lot easier than to get them to send an email, for example, and introduce you. But one thing is an introduction to somebody else in that agency. Another thing might be an objective at an agency might be getting documentation. I put out a post this morning on the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, whatever. I already screwed it up. But you guys know what it is. It's CISA, right, under DHS. And I put this out. And in there, I said that I couldn't find strategic plans or their annual forecast or annual report. And so if I call somebody at an agency like theirs, I would set that as my objective. Could I get a copy of that document? It's generally a public document. It's just not on their website. I'm not able to find it right now on the internet. And so that would be an objective. And the reason I want that is because it will help me in my business development and capture by understanding more of their what they've done in the last year, the challenges they face, and the goals they have for the out years. And so that kind of stuff is very valuable to me. That's a good objective because it moves the sale forward. I already used some examples with industry in there, and I just want to wrap up with purpose to give you a couple others. Almost always the purpose of this meeting is to share a little bit about us and to learn more about you. When I go into agencies, it tends to be more 60-40 or 70-30, where I want to share 20 or 30% about us during the meeting. And really the bigger purpose is for me to ask you questions that I wasn't able to discover from doing research online. So an example is I want to go knock on PEO Digital's doors. I would talk to this person I'm going to meet and say, look, I did this research. I found the industry day slides. I actually found this briefing deck that they put out for something else. So I've absorbed these, but I have some questions where I want to dig into the organization a little bit more, but also some challenges you might have around SharePoint. So, that's my purpose. And again, I summarize that by saying I want to share a little bit about us. And then really, I'd like to spend the bulk of our meeting talking about your agency and some of the challenges and goals that you have before you. How does that sound? Can we do that? Okay, so I blew through pretty fast on this topic. What I want you to remember from planning purposes is use a call plan. If you want a copy of that, go ahead and put call plan, please, in the comments, and I'll send you my template. But the call plan has three main sections I want you to pay attention to from now on when you go into meetings. Have an icebreaker, so you're talking about business that leads to the purpose. Have a purpose statement, what you're going to talk about, that you can share with the other person. And then have an objective, this selfish thing that you want to get out that will move the sale forward. And when I say selfish, I don't mean it in any kind of bad way. I just mean it's okay at the objectives to think about you. In the purpose, you think win-win about them and you. Hope this made sense to everybody. I'll look for the comments and I'll try to get back on those. If you found this valuable, give us valuable training today, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is coming back tomorrow for when I dive into how to ask the right questions in a meeting. I'll see you at the next event.